I ended up walking into my CEO's office and just saying, I'm done. Like, I can't do this for one more minute. You know, you could say was the dream job. I completely burnt myself out. It's not the things that we talk about that are a problem. It's the things that we don't talk about. We always look and say, well, if we could fix the women, we could just make the women more confident and fit into the system better, then we'd be okay. And if we could just fix the men, not be biased and not be this and not be that we would fix the problem. Men aren't the problem. The system is the problem. Patriarchy is the problem.
Our guest today is Megan Dalla-Camina, a leadership strategist, author, and advocate for women's empowerment. Through her writing, speaking, and advisory work, she helps women step into leadership with clarity, confidence, and purpose.
So many women don't realize, like, we all think, oh, that's just the way it is. Or we think, I'm the problem. And what I find with the work that we do with women specifically is once they realize it's not just me and you're not the problem, everything shifts. That's when we start to feel truly empowered.
Welcome back to Beyond the Keynote. I am so excited today to be speaking to Megan Dalla-Camina, who is the founder and CEO of Women Rising, an incredible author and amazing keynote speaker. Megan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you.
I am so glad that you decided to come on, and thank you so much. Maybe it's a big thank you to your team for sending me your incredible, amazing book, which is just here for those of you who are actually watching rather than just listening. Of course, called Women Rising, because that's what the whole business is. And I can't wait to dive into that. It's the type of book where you don't have to read from cover to cover. You can go and choose your own adventure, which I've done, and went straight to some of the sections where I was like, ooh, what's she going to say here? What's she going to say here? And it's been eye-opening. So I can't wait to dive in and speak about that. But before we get to the book, I'd love to know who the human is behind the book and behind the speaker. Who is Megan? And when you were younger, a little girl, did you ever imagine that you would be an author and a global speaker?
It's such an interesting question because if you asked me if I ever thought I'd be a corporate executive, I would have said no. But if you asked me, would I be a writer and someone who talks for a living, I would have said absolutely yes. Okay. Because I grew up as a writer and as an actress. So I was always performing. Since I was 3, I started dancing, and then as soon as I could hold a pencil, I was writing poems and stories, and I was on stage my entire childhood until I was 23, 24. So
I love that. We have very similar upbringings, it seems.
Yes. So very well trained, especially in theatre, to be on a stage, to be performing, to be communicating, to be conveying a message, all of course which, fully translates into being a speaker and to being an author, author now of 4 books with another one coming out, so 5. So yes, would be the short answer.
Oh, that's amazing. And so for me, I did end up on stage from a very young age, I think 4 years of age. My mum put me into calisthenics, so similar to dance. But I was so shy, and I loved going each week. But when it came to concert time, they thought that I would run off the stage crying. And it turned out that I just shined up there and absolutely loved it. But for me, on reflection, like when I think about, because then I went into theatre for years and years as well, and ended up studying formally and doing a Bachelor of Performing Arts at Monash University. For me, on stage, when I'm acting, I'm playing a character. It's not me up there, so it's not like I'm exposing myself. And I had to learn how to be the thought leader speaking on stage as me and be okay with that and not be hidden by the character, if that makes sense. So for you, when you were dancing and then performing for many years, was that just your happy place? You loved it? And did you like being seen, or I don't want to say the center of attention because I think that has negative connotations, but did you like being seen outside of that, or were you shy as well?
Was not shy growing up.
Excellent.
I've gotten more introverted the older that I've gotten, which is really it's a whole nother conversation. But no, I loved being on stage. I was on stage dancing. I was doing spoken word poetry, Eisteddfods. I was, acting in plays. I did the whole thing. Loved it. Just loved
Amazing.
it. So
Okay.
my entire childhood. Yeah, not shy. Not
did
shy.
you ever dream of becoming an actor or anything like that?
I did. Growing up, no one thought that I would ever do anything else than become an actress. My goal was become an actress, move to Hollywood, marry Charlie Sheen by the time I'm 25, showing my age.
Or maybe
And
it's good that you didn't marry
that's
Charlie
good
Sheen.
that I didn't do that, thank goodness. But that was always the plan. I went to performing arts school after college, after high school. That was just always the track.
Okay.
Never thought that I would do anything different.
Wow. We are the same person so far. So you somehow ended up in corporate. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, gosh, that's a story. So finished performing arts school. A whole lot of different things happened. I got chronic fatigue when I was 21. Long before they knew what chronic fatigue was. I was in bed for 6 months, like really ill. Came out of that, went to NIDA and did some training at NIDA. Not their 3-year program, but just some training with Dean Carey at the time. And then a couple of years after that of doing, bit of acting over here, dancing over here, part-time jobs, I had a car accident. And that wasn't a bad car accident, but I hurt my back quite badly. And that was kind of a turning point. I had 6 months of rehab and wasn't working. And at that point, I was in a relationship. I was engaged to be married to my now ex-husband. And I was at that pivotal point. Do I keep pursuing this? Do I go to LA? I had talks of, record things in LA, or do I go and get a real job?
Okay.
And
isn't that interesting how we say go and get a real job?
Yeah, well, that was I should have said that in inverted commas because that's what that's what everyone was saying.
But that's
to me.
how I felt too.
Right?
Yes,
Yes.
You
So
made to feel
common.
that way.
So common for those of us in the performing arts, particularly at that stage, I think.
Yeah,
But it's probably no different now. Probably worse actually because it's in so many ways harder, I would imagine. So I went for a job interview for a part-time job. Because my back, I could only work part-time. And it was with GE, the General Electric company.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting that job and working in their electronic commerce business. It was just 5 years before e-business and all of that blew up. And that was the start of my corporate career.
wow.
Yeah. And then I did 18 years in corporate after that.
Oh my goodness. I did 18 years in corporate. I say 18 and a half to be exact, but yes, I did 18 years in corporate accidentally as well.
Totally
Just
by accident.
accidentally working my way up through the business, which it sounds like you did potentially in multiple businesses. So, all right. So you're in corporate. There's a lot of things that you just described that happened in your life that led you to being there. Tell us about that corporate journey because from reading the book, I know that I don't know whether it was in that corporate journey or on reflection that you realised certain things were happening in the business that were potentially holding you back as a female or it was harder for you to progress than it would have been if you weren't. So tell us about your journey there, and then I'd love to sort of hear where the idea for the book came and when Women Rising came into the picture.
So I spent 18 years in corporate. So I was 5 years with GE, and I very quickly went from an admin role, which is where they hired me, into a marketing role. And I completely fell in love with marketing. So then it became by choice, like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I spent 5 years at GE, mostly in Asia.
Okay.
Fell in love with Asia, traveling. I used to spend 3 weeks in Asia, 1 week back in Australia. That was my commute for about 4 years.
Where in Asia were you?
Everywhere, everywhere, but mostly centrally in Hong Kong, but also, through China, through Japan, Singapore, like literally everywhere. I was in an Asia role. So I would just, hop over to the US for some meetings, come back. I loved it. It was fabulous. So I did that, went from GE to PwC.
Okay.
So male-dominated to more male-dominated. Spent a number of years at PwC at a really interesting time. It was through the Enron, saga, where all of the consulting firms of the big five had to separate from the accounting firms. So almost went through a global IPO with the PwC consulting business. Spent a lot of time working on that deal. And then literally 2 days before that happened, and we went to IPO in New York, IBM bought the consulting business of PwC. So then I ended up at IBM. In that time, had a baby, was married, had a baby. 18 months later, got divorced, and very quickly sort of rose at IBM, and I ended up as director of marketing at IBM.
Amazing.
And again, loved all of this, loved every phase and stage of this corporate journey, and just kept getting the next role and all of the things. But a couple of years into that role as head of marketing, which, you could say was the dream job, it's one of the top marketing jobs in the country, what I'd worked my whole career for, I completely burnt myself out. And, I didn't burn myself out. My life, my job, being a single mother, I did my first master's degree in business, had this big executive job as a very young woman in this very male-dominated environment, and didn't have the tools to really understand, how do I navigate this environment? How do I take care of myself? How do I balance being a single parent with this big, all-consuming executive role? And I burnt out. And that was really one of the early pivot points of what do I want for myself. And I ended up walking into my CEO's office and just saying, I'm done. I can't do this for one more minute.
Wow.
And was going to resign, but ended up renegotiating. And one of the roles that I was doing was also strategy. So we pulled strategy out, and I became the strategy executive, general manager, 4 days a week.
Okay.
And I did that for 7 years. So in that time, this was the last 7 years of my corporate career, that's when I started to look around and go, something's not quite right here. Something's a bit off.
Yes.
And what is that? Why do I look around and see men everywhere? I'd grown up around boys. My school was 22 boys, 5 girls for my entire high school years. I sung in bands with boys. It was not unusual for me to be in an environment surrounded by boys or men. But when I got to this stage of my journey, I was like this, something's just not right. And what is it? And how do we as women thrive professionally and thrive personally? What does that equation look like? So I went back and did a second master's degree in wellness and positive psychology. I started doing a lot of work around diversity and women's leadership at IBM, and really just got into the science and practice of flourishing. And then 7 years after that, I left corporate because I'd written my first book. I was looking around going, there's no other job that I want, and I really want to make this my life's work. I really want to just help women rise. That's what I'm here for. And that was 13 years ago. So that's kind of the timeline of how we ended up with Women Rising, which as a sort of business brand offering came into market 5 years ago.
Yeah, incredible. And I mean, I can think of a few interesting moments that I had in my corporate career as a female. I'd be interested to know, in the 7 years that you were there doing the strategy role, where you started really thinking and reflecting and observing, what did you observe? What did you notice that? And let's just make sure that for any men listening right now, we love you too.
We love men.
This is not about exclusion men. Or
absolutely not.
I have a lot of incredible male clients, and I worked in a very male-dominated industry too, and had great male colleagues and managers and leaders and all the rest of it. And I honestly didn't think about it that much when I was there, because I always felt like, well, I can do what anyone else can, whether they're male or female. You know, don't hold me back.
And I was the same too.
Yes, and it sounds like you were, and I did thoroughly enjoy my time in my corporate role too, and I got to a point where I similar maybe to you, I looked around and I thought, because I was always like, what's the next role, what's the next role, what's the next role? And then I thought, I don't think I want the next role. What am I going to do then? Like, what am I here for if the next role is not what I want? And that's when I left and started my own business, which is just over 7 years ago now. So, what type of things did you observe?
It's really interesting, right? Because I was the same as you. Didn't occur to me for 1 second until quite late in my corporate journey that there was a problem, that women were in any way disadvantaged at work.
Yes.
Just didn't occur to me at all. And I think going into IBM, IBM, diversity has always been part of the DNA of IBM. Like so many incredible female leaders, and I just didn't see the gender issue. A number of years later, we started working on something called the Male Champions of Change. It's now the Change Champions Coalition with Elizabeth Broderick, the Sex Discrimination Commissioner, and IBM was the first company in. It was the CEO, Glenn at the time, and myself as one of the first implementation leaders. And that was cross-organisation in Australia. It's grown globally, but with the top CEOs, public and private and government in the country, to really look at what are the issues. And we went and did listening tours, and we had, Martin Parkinson, head of Treasury, and my CEO and Telstra CEO and bank CEOs, and doing these listening tours with women, with men, around like, what are the challenges? How do we, and all of these powerful men, male CEOs, coming together so that we could get to gender equality? This is 2010.
Yeah, okay.
And as we did this work, we're all looking for the silver bullet. Like, we're all looking for, surely there's something here that if we can just solve that problem, all the other problems will be fixed, women will rise, we'll get to equality, bias will come out of the system and all the rest of it. And of course that didn't happen because there is no one silver bullet. But what took me long after, and then, year after year after year, small things would improve and then we'd go back, and small things would improve and then we'd go back, and we're still seeing exactly the same thing today. What became very clear to me, particularly in the last sort of 6-7 years in my own company, is that it's not the things that we talk about that are the problem. Okay. It's the things that we don't talk about. It's the things that we don't name, and the things that we don't really understand that are the reasons why we are still where we are. And that, we always look and say, well, if we could fix the women, right, if we could just make the women more confident and fit into the system better, then we'd be okay. And if we could just fix the men to not be biased and not be this and not be that we would fix the problem. Men aren't the problem. Patriarchy is the problem, right? The system is the problem. And I run a Male Allies program. I work with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of men around the world who come in and do the work, and they're like, I just didn't know. Like, I didn't know. I couldn't put words to it. I don't know what to do. We're scared of doing the wrong thing. And that's why I wrote Women Rising, because we've been doing this work for I've been doing it for the last 13 years, but in the Women Rising program, we've had 10,500 women in 68 countries do this work with us in 5 years. Like, that's massive.
It's amazing, yeah.
And like all cultures, all industries, so many different countries. And there are all of these threads that sit under the surface. That when we're talking diversity and inclusion, when we're talking equity, no one's talking about. And that's where the book really came into play, because, the first part of the book, looking at the paradoxes of power, what are these paradoxes that keep us stuck in the systems that we're in, and how do we start to pull them apart? How do we interrogate them? How do we unravel them? How do we get women to awaken to the fact that I'm not the problem. The system's the problem. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. How do we get men to realize they're not the problem, but they have the power and privilege in the system that's not working for women and for many other people as well, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I've really tried to put together in the book so that we can have this different level of understanding of what is actually going on here and what do we do systemically, but more importantly, what do women do? How do they see themselves in those systems? And what's men's role in being allies and sponsors and advocates for women so that we create a better place for everybody of all genders?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. When I started it's so big, isn't it? I started reading the book and I was like, that is true. The system is a challenge. And I remember back when I had kids, and I love when you told your story, you're like, I was doing this and I was doing this and then I had a baby and then I was doing that. And that's pretty much how I describe mine as well. I'm like, and then I went from a state role to a national role, and then I studied marketing because I realised I only had a performing arts degree, but I was in the marketing department, and then I had a couple of kids, and then and it was just like, run over that bit, just had a couple of kids. I remember I went back to my role within 5 or 6 months each time that I had one of my children, because back then there was no flexibility in the workplace. It was, way before COVID. I think COVID shifted a lot of things in the workplace. And I wouldn't have been able to keep my leadership position if I didn't go back full time. And there was just no way that I was going to be happy falling backwards, I would have said. Yes. That's how I would have described it, because I'd worked so hard to get to where I was in my career. And I remember when my husband and I first started trying to have a child, a lot of my friends had had children before me, and a lot of them had struggled and taken a really long time to get pregnant. So I was like, I'm this age, I guess I better start. So I started trying to get pregnant, and then I got pregnant straight away. And I was so stressed out by that because it was like, but I thought it was going to take a long time, and I don't think I can take the break in my career. And what happens if I go on maternity leave, and are they going to give me my job back? Like, it was like this big stress.
Yeah.
And then I, obviously relaxed into it. But I remember just before I was supposed to go on leave, it was like I didn't want to hand anything over. And I didn't know if they were going to, it felt like I didn't know if they were going to have me back. And I remember my leader pulling me aside one day and saying, Carmen, what is going on? And I was probably extremely hormonal because I worked up to, the nth time that my doctor would let me before I left. And I said, I just don't know if my role's going to be here when I get back. She's like, of course it's going to be here. And it used to really annoy me when people would say, you don't know how you're going to feel once you've had the baby. Maybe you won't want to come back. And I was like, I am coming back. Stop telling me I'm not coming back. I'm coming back. And I did. And I did want to. And I do understand that sometimes people do have a change of feeling. But I was so upset by the way everyone was behaving around the fact that I was going to change my mind. And then the interesting thing in terms of policies that were in place in a business, it was policy when you went on maternity leave that you would get paid out all of your leave. And I said to payroll, I don't want to get paid out all of my leave, because when I come back, I want to know I've got some holidays sitting there in case I want to go on holidays. And they're like, oh, okay. And I had company credit card, had company car, like everything had to get handed back in. And I had to do a lot of negotiating to say, hey, I'm only planning on being away for 5 to 6 months. So you're saying I've got to go and buy a car to have for 6 months, to then sell the car, to then come back to the car, or you're going to cancel my credit card and then try and get it back. Why don't we just put some things on hold or figure this out? And luckily I'd been at the company for such a long time that they did negotiate with me and work some things out. But I went to the head of people and culture and I said, you do realise that the message that you're sending right now is don't come back.
Yeah.
Do not come back. And so I would like to think that I helped make some change, because I know that by the time I was leaving the company, it was very normal for women in senior leadership who had the cars and all the things to just keep their car when they went on leave, and it wasn't even questioned. There was no negotiation. I actually paid the company to hold on to my car during that time. That was part of my negotiation. But I know that it progressed from there. So I was very happy to know that happened. And for me, as I said before I read the book, it was like, that's just how it was. That's just what had to happen, because that's what happened at the time. I didn't even think about it. I was so grateful that I got to pay to keep my car instead of having to go and buy another car. So I think in terms of the patriarchy and the structure that you talk about, it just makes so much sense on reflection. You just don't realise you're in that hamster wheel when you're in it. And the other thing I thought was interesting about, I'm sure you mentioned this in the book, is just our unconscious bias that both men and women have around this, because I did go back to work quickly, and my husband decided to go part-time when I went back, and he spent a bit more time with our children. And so when I was back, I would have people say, oh, you're back. Like they'd just see me in the hallway or something around the building. I'd say, yeah. How many days are you back? And I'd say, I'm back full-time in my position. And they're like, oh, what are you doing with your baby? Like I'd just left it on the side of the road or something. And my husband would get the opposite, where people would stop him. He might be out with our baby somewhere and they'd say, oh, what are you doing? Have you got a day off? And he'd say, no, I'm part-time. I'm looking after my child today. Oh, when are you going back full-time? And if we had have been in the opposite roles, no one would have questioned anything.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just one of the very many biases, right, that exist in the system. And it hurts men as well. Like all of these things hurt men. They hurt women in different ways. And women do bear so much of the brunt of, patriarchal systems and structures and the social conditioning and the gender normative behaviour. Like, oh, what do you mean you're working full time? Who's got the baby? Oh, is dad babysitting tonight? Because he's looking after his kids. Like all of this is programmed into our cultural and societal narratives. But the thing that so many women don't realise, like we all think, oh, that's just the way it is. Or we think, I'm the problem. Yes. And what I find with the work that we do with women specifically is once they realise it's not just me and you're not the problem, everything shifts. That's when we start to feel truly empowered. Yeah. And that's why I'm so passionate about this work.
So important. It's so fantastic. And you're right, it does affect men as well. I remember I was on a project team within the business at one point where we were looking at how do we create more flexibility for senior women who do want to have children and want to come back into the workplace in a senior role still, but not necessarily in what was the traditional full-time capacity. And in the discussion at one point, I said, well, we need to consider the men as well, the dads. And one of the senior men in the room said, oh, no, we don't need to worry about them. They're fine. Like, they don't need this. And a few of us just looked at each other and paused. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, they're probably a partner of someone that may or may not want flexibility too, or they might need to be the one that's going to be at home for a bit if they're supporting another person in their relationship who needs to or who wants to be full time. So why wouldn't you offer the same thing that we're talking about for women here to men, to dads? And he was like, oh, Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I hadn't really thought about it that way. And he was amazing. I loved him. I loved working with him. So it wasn't, it's just that it was so ingrained in him that this was this new thing we were doing, and we had to do it for women because women were the ones that needed it.
Yes.
And, you know, it wasn't about, well, it's a partnership at home often and there's a child involved and there's two people potentially, not always, like yourself, looking after the child. So how do we figure it out for both parties?
Yeah.
Now, let's take it back to speaking for a minute, because this is such an interesting topic. I could talk about it forever with you, as I'm sure you could, given it's your life's work. I believe that early on in your business, you did a lot of speaking, and that was potentially part of your marketing or part of you causing an impact out into the world with your message. Tell us about how you got into speaking.
So I did a lot of speaking in my corporate career. You know, I was always in these leadership roles. So whether I was, you know, head of marketing at GE and, you know, they'd send me to India and, you know, go speak at this event or whatever. So right from my mid-20s, I was always on a stage somewhere or in front of an audience somewhere. And then, you know, in my last sort of 7 years at IBM, doing a lot of speaking around women's leadership, diversity, inclusion, etc. So that was like my jumping off point from my corporate career. I had my first book out. So as soon as I left, I was out there doing keynotes on my book, and I was coaching women and I was speaking. So keynotes in corporate, workshops, big stages, small stages, you know, and everything in between. So, yeah, so that was, you know, I did that. Speaking was a huge part of my business for probably I'd probably say the first 8 years. You know, It was really a very core part of my revenue stream of my business as an end to itself. And then also, of course, as where are the audiences that we need to connect with, and you know, and what does that look like, and speaking as a pathway, as a thought leader to do that. Yeah, it was a really fundamental part of my business for a long time.
And how did you find that it helped in your business? Obviously, there's a lot of parts to making a business run and grow like you have, but how did speaking fit in, and what did it allow for the business or for you personally?
Yeah, I think in my business, it was very much, number one, positioning as a thought leader, so as a women's leadership expert.
Yes.
And there's a number of pathways to do that. Being an author is a pathway to do that. And I think the other really core part, or certainly then, I think it's a bit different now, but certainly then speaking was, you know, was another one. Being booked by organisations, being booked at your big industry conferences, being booked at women's conferences. So, you know, positioning as a thought leader, positioning as a coach, because I was a coach. So, you know, doing various different types of speaking was a great way to, you know, get coaching clients, which for a lot of coaches is challenging. And I never had that challenge. And I think it was because I did so much speaking. And that was a great channel for coaching. I'd say, yeah.
And so when you were using it in that way in your business, would you often speak for free or would you charge a fee? How did you structure your speaking from a business perspective?
Oh, the good old speak for free question. It's so controversial, right? So I would say 90% of my speaking engagements were paid speaking engagements. I mean, it was a revenue stream in my business.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important conversation for speakers and business owners to be looking at. Like, when will you go and speak for free? And, you know, most of the time you need to get paid, right? Like this is what you're doing. And then there would be certain things that I would agree to speak at for free. It could be a not-for-profit event, could have been something like a really important event in my industry or in the industry. that was filled with corporate speakers, filled with corporate executives that they, never received payment for. Just like when I was a corporate executive, you'd never get paid. You couldn't take money for speaking. So therefore they didn't pay their other speakers, but it was important, for the business or branding or thought leadership positioning to be at that event. So there'd be a handful of those that I would waive my fee for.
Yes.
But typically they were paid speaking engagements.
And I think that's an important thing to think through. And for the speakers that are listening, you probably already know this, and those that are thinking about speaking, it's not that you can never speak for free or that it's a bad idea necessarily to speak for free. It's about thinking strategically about, well, if I am going to speak for free and give the value and my time, then what is the potential return on your investment of doing that for speaking for free? And I mean, sometimes, as you said, you gained a lot of coaching clients from speaking. Sometimes you can make your money back big time, more than speaking fee would be from what you can gain in business from speaking. And I think the positioning is so important. It really is a great marketing tool in that it elevates your personal brand, elevates the business brand. Obviously, when you do it well, it does those things for you. So love that you used that. Now, you said you spoke on some very big stages and some smaller stages. What would you say is the biggest stage you've spoken on?
Oh, thousands of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thousands of people.
And when you think about it, because it can be quite a different, well, it's definitely a different experience for both the speaker and the audience, and the energy required in front of 1,000 people versus a small group is different. I often say to clients, you're going to look a little bit crazy if you speak the same way in front of 20 that you would in front of 1,000, and you're going to look really flat and boring in the opposite if you spoke in front of those thousands the way you would in front of 20. What do you prefer? Do you have a more favourite setting?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's changed as I've grown in my business, and just as I've evolved and my work has evolved. I much prefer now smaller groups because I want to be intimate and deep.
Yes. Okay.
Versus broadcast in terms of speaking, and just energetically that fits better with me, than I don't aspire to be in stadiums and be, you know what I mean? Like I've never aspired to be the Tony Robbins of women's empowerment, women's leadership.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember going to see Oprah speak when she was here, when she came all those years ago, and just looking around that room and just going, no, I don't feel, I mean, it may be, who knows? Like I would never say never. And for me, it's always, and I think this is really important for speakers to think about, for the sake of what, right? Like for the sake of what is your intention?
Yes.
How does it align with your purpose? How do you feel?
Yes.
Like I think we so often push ourselves to do things, and we should absolutely address our fears and not do something because we're scared of doing it. So that's in one bucket. But the other bucket is like, where do I feel alignment?
Yes.
Where do I feel called? Do I feel called to go and do a big rah-rah keynote in a stadium? I don't at this stage of my journey. But I feel deeply called to share my message and to connect with people and to get into conversation, and to elevate consciousness.
Yes.
But there's lots of different ways of doing that.
Absolutely.
I'd rather have a podcast conversation that could go and, spread where we go deeper. And everyone's different, but really understanding where does speaking fit in your business, and what is the alignment? Where are the values? Where is the purpose? What is the message? And where is the audience for that message? Yes. How does all of that line up for you? And don't make yourself feel like you should do something and that you have to do something because other people have done it that way. Do it your way.
Yes.
Yeah, do it your way.
So important, absolutely, to do it your way. And I agree. Don't not do it just because there's a fear there, because alignment doesn't mean that it's not scary sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And timing is really important as well. Like I've had a lot of conversation. Why haven't you done a TED Talk yet? And when's the TED Talk coming? And all the rest of it. And I have always said no, and I haven't felt called. I haven't felt the time was right. But I did say to my team a couple of weeks ago, I think maybe the next book is the TED Talk. Like I think and I'm, doing my PhD research. Like I think the time's coming. But I have to feel really drawn in to, okay, now's the time with this message for this audience.
Yes.
Rather than just, that's the next thing on the list that I need to tick off. Maybe 10 years ago I felt like that, but I don't feel like that anymore.
Yeah, you're not in that place anymore. Sounds like you're in a good space where you're doing things because they align with you, you're doing things for impact and how you can help others, which is incredible. So I'd love to know, I'm pretty sure that you're allowed to share with us now, because we might be recording this now, but in terms of when it's released, we can talk a little bit about the new book that's launching. So the Women Rising book is very much about corporate women and your experience in corporate and the structures that are currently sitting in that system that may or may not be supporting women in different ways, and men sometimes. So tell us about what's the new direction, what's the new book going to be focused on?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say Women Rising was for professional women. You don't need to be in corporate, but, women who work outside the home, and really looking at patriarchy in a patriarchy and what are the tools for women to rise, whatever that looks like for them. So that is how I would frame Women Rising. The book before Women Rising was called Simple, Soulful, Sacred.
Okay.
Which is a woman's journey to clarity, comfort, and coming home to herself. So there's been this really interesting weave on my path between sort of that, that real professional women's leadership, women's career development work, and women's sort of spiritual work and spiritual journey and underpinnings, and with well-being sort of tied, through all of that. So this, and I've kind of gone book to book to book on that journey, which has been kind of fascinating on my journey anyway. So the next book is called She Who Remembers: Awakening Feminine Wisdom in a World Ready for Her Return. Ooh. And it is really,
I like it.
Just stick with that for a minute. It's so funny when we're recording this, because that's the first time I've said that on a podcast.
Oh, I feel very privileged right now.
Months ahead of release, yeah. Well, by the time this airs, we'll be in pre-orders.
That's
comes
right,
out, comes out April 13, 2026.
So exciting.
And it's very much a deep feminine wisdom journey, primarily for women, but it's also carries on this cultural narrative and this cultural critique that I've gone deeply into in Women Rising on a very personal level for women. So why are we where we are? Why is the world calling so deeply for the feminine to rise in all of us, not just in women? And what does that journey look like? Again, specifically for women, but I feel like it's going to find its way into the hands of other people as well.
Yes. Wow. Well, I'm excited. I look forward to the release, and we'll have to get myself a copy once it's launched. And it's interesting that we're even talking about this. I've been talking to a lady from the United States recently who is doing similar, or work in a similar area in that. So she was also in corporate, and she found that she was always in her masculine energy to fit in to the system, I guess. Now that I've learned what you've written about, I would say that. And I was exactly the same. I definitely stepped into my masculine energy to push forward my voice and be heard and get things done and rise to the top, fight to the top, maybe I would say. And just recently I've been talking to her about just using, and I feel like since I've started Illuminated Story, I've been able to relax a little bit more into my feminine energy, and even my brand, I brought in a dusky pink colour. I made sure I kept the black and white because I do serve a lot of men and I didn't want to scare any men away from my brand, but I did bring in that soft dusky pink, and that was me almost rebelling back against the years of having to be more masculine in my role. And I think, and as you said, it's not just a female thing, because men can tap into a feminine energy and a masculine energy as well. And when we use both in the right way, we can become more powerful in what we do, which you would know more than I would about this. I'm just starting to learn.
Well, I mean, that's so core to the Women Rising work, right? Like, this is what I teach. I teach the women how to balance your feminine and your masculine, because so many of us, when we are in professional environments and really any work environment, we go straight into our masculine energy. And also awakening men to the fact that they have feminine energy, and how do they use that so that they can show up authentically. So this is the next extension. Like, why have we lost this? Why have we lost our ability to tap into these feminine traits, vulnerability, empathy, intuition? How do we reclaim that? What is that journey? Because that is all feminine wisdom that is deeply buried in so many of us as women. And that's the true path to our power.
Yes. And I think, and if you flip it to speaking even, I mean, a great speaker is also a great listener. And I remember earlier in our conversation today, you said you went on a listening tour to really figure out what was happening in professional spaces and why are we still stuck. I know I've used that in one of my keynotes, the statistic that we're still, I don't know, 175 years or 200 years or whatever it is now away from equality. It's like, what? How are we that far away? This is insane. So listening and empathy and all of those amazing skills are so important as a speaker, because although you might be the one up there speaking, and sometimes it is the big stage and you do need to bring the energy, because if you don't bring the energy, you're going to come across flat. But the pre-work that goes into that message is all about listening and understanding and figuring out what's going to be most valuable for the audience, so that when you're up there and you've got their attention, that you're actually giving something that's really valuable to them when you're up on the stage. So it's interesting, I think, even for speakers, being able to tap into some of that feminine energy could be very powerful.
Yeah, and your intuition as well, because I'm always thinking when you're speaking, I mean, there's so many different ways, right? There's, okay, let's go survey the audience and let's give them exactly what they want. To the other side of that spectrum, which is, this is my deep work. This is coming from the deepest resources of my intuition about what I'm here to share, and what's really aligned to my purposeful path. So, like, where do you sit? On that spectrum when you're speaking, I think is a really interesting question as well. It
is, and your intuition in the moment. So your intuition. So if 100%. When you are that deep expert in what you're talking about, to being able to shift on stage depending on what you're getting back and where the interest seems to be lying with the audience.
And the energy of the room, right? Like I think that's one of the biggest challenges, particularly if you are doing big stages.
Yes.
Like, how do you hold, I do a lot of energy work. How do you hold that energy? How do you hold the energy of the room? And that is, there's one way of doing that, or many ways of doing that, but, it looks like one thing when you've got a big space and 1,000 people in a room. And then if you've got 20 people in a room, it's not necessarily easier, right? But it's different. Like, how do you hold that energy? How do you respond? How do you bring them with you? And how do you bring them with you?
I actually still do a lot of very intimate workshops where there's only 6 people in the room. And that's often because I'm putting them on stage as well, and I want them to get a good amount of stage time, I call it. But you've got to create, especially with what I'm doing, you've got to create a very safe space for people. And the more intimate the room is, the safer the space. It's like the safer the space you need to create, because there's nowhere for anyone to hide. And people feel that. They feel that they could get called upon at any minute. And if you haven't created a container where that's okay, that they get called upon at any minute, then you're not going to get the best out of the person, I think. So you said before that you love the intimate speaking the most at the moment, because you get to go deep. So tell us about what you're doing in that space and what you love so much about it.
Yeah, it's so funny. I said that before, and then I was thinking about a keynote that I gave a couple of weeks ago to 300 women.
Okay.
In a sort of open space that was a keynote talk, which I absolutely loved, because in that environment there was so much connection and so much engagement. We had I love the Q&A. We had this brilliant Q&A afterwards. We could have talked for 4 hours. It was so dynamic. So I say that, but then I think, oh yeah, but that was amazing. And so I think it depends. You know, I really think it depends. I'm thinking back to the Women Rising book launches that we did, you know, where I was on stage. We had 200 women, you know, and men in one space, and, you know, 150 in another space. That was very intimate. You know, that's quite a decent space, but it was the way that we created it, sitting on stage, being interviewed, having discussion. And then you can be in a space with 10 women or 20 women or 50 women, and it feels like something completely different. So, yeah, for me right now, it is just what's true. You know, like what's true? What am I feeling called to share? What's going to be of service? Like, is this going to be useful is always the question that I ask before when I get approached, which I do a lot. Like, how will I be of service in this situation? And for sort of corporate speaking events that I say yes to, that I've been doing for 20 years, that's really the criteria now. It's not about my brand, and it's not about thought leadership, and it's not about positioning. It's not even about selling. It is, how will me showing up at this event be of service? How will it be useful? And therefore, is this a yes or a no? You know, given everything else that's going on, you know, in my business. So there's lots of different parameters. When we go into the next book launch, it's going to be much more, I say intimate, and as soon as I say that, you watch, I'll get invited to go speak to 20,000 women on a stage in Texas. You know, you watch this space. As soon as I say something, the universe goes, no,
and we're doing
no. Let's go do that. So we'll see what happens.
I mean, I could see you doing that for sure.
Yeah.
We've got to remember, little Megan came from that performance background and then did acting for many years. And I think if we go back to your Oprah example, it's interesting because I have tickets to see her this year. So I'm very interested to see what experience they create for the audience. She does have a gift, and one of her gifts, I think, is that she can touch people. So she might have a huge crowd, but each person can feel touched by her in that setting. And that's what I would want to do if I was. Do you know what I mean? And like, that's such an art form. Versus, because I think sometimes you look at people on stage and they are on a big stage and they are really that's not who I am. So how do you show up in those spaces on big stages but be true? When I get the call, I'll ring you and you can help me figure that out, because okay, sounds great. Let's collaborate.
For me, it's got to be authentic, right? Like, it's got to be. It has to be authentic.
I did a talk myself just a couple of weekends ago, and I called it bringing out your inner performer. But what I was actually talking about was, and I mentioned this earlier, that I loved acting, but I didn't love being the center of attention, and I was more of an introvert. And then I had to learn how to use the performance skills as me on stage. And so I think energy is so interesting. And I mean, you study this, you can have energy about you in that huge space and not be jumping around like a maniac on stage, but you just have this presence about you because you are in the moment. So I talk about good acting and bad acting, and you would know this, you trained as well. A really great actor, you don't know they're acting because they are the person that you're watching. Yes. They've become that person. They're 100% in character, authentic. And I think that's what you have to be as the speaker. You have to be 100% in the moment as you, sharing that message from that place of passion and the impact that you want to have on the audience. And your energy does need to match the crowd, but energy doesn't mean that it has to be external in that, you know, it has to be huge gestures and jumping around the stage. You can still be fairly still and just have this incredible energy about you that shines and resonates out to the audience. Does that make sense?
Like it does. I've been listening to Wayne Dyer. Do you know Wayne Dyer, yes. Right? I've been re-listening to some of his earlier work on my walks recently, and you saw him many stages on many stages, and we had the same publisher for many years, and was with him, in Sydney a few weeks before he passed, actually, and he would just sit on the stage.
Yeah, okay.
He would just sit in a chair, and he would just talk.
Yes.
But his presence, his energy, the way he captured the audience as a storyteller and as a wisdom teacher was remarkable. And you felt that energy. I remember once sitting in Sydney in the ICC. I think it was something before that, big room, and he walked on the stage and I started crying. Energy straight away, just through his presence.
Yes. And
Marianne Williamson's the same. If you go and watch these spiritual teachers.
Yes.
So I think it's just finding like what is that and how do you build that, and then how do you show up on that stage in your full presence.
Yes.
And authenticity. I think that's a question for me as a speaker in this stage of my journey that I'm really interested in
exploring,
without it ever being performative.
Yes.
You know, not interested in the performative piece.
Yeah. And I use the word performance, but I think performance is when you're 100% in the moment. So if you think about theatre, there is theatre that are big musicals with all the amazing bells and whistles and lighting and sound, and you can absolutely create those experiences, and I have written things like that in keynote shows for clients before because that's what they want to create, and it's fun, and that version can work. And then there's theatre that's, you know, a one-woman show or a one-man show, and it's quite minimalistic and there's hardly any set. They might use one prop or one chair, and they might just dress in black, and it's their presence and the fact that they're just 100% in this story they're sharing with you. And I think that's still performance and theatre. But I know what you mean when you say I don't want to perform, I don't want to pretend to be someone else. Yeah, I see good performances as not pretending, as being. I think it's when you're being.
Yeah. See, I would, so I completely understand what you're saying and agree. When I think about the speakers that like Marianne Williamson, like Wayne Dyer, and there's others, I don't see performance at all. I just see presence.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Because they are just fully they are just fully there in their essence. There's no performance to how they show up. But then there's other speakers who you see, like if you watch Oprah, you know, the Super Soul tours and everything. Yes. Performance. Yeah. Like absolute performance. Yes, you know? Yeah. So I think it's interesting for us as speakers. Like where do we fit on which stage? How do we want to show up? What does that look like? Different stages.
And the same speaker, yes, different stages as in different physical stages and different stages as in different stages in your career and life.
Both.
And
absolutely.
And where you want to be and how you want to show up.
Yeah.
Oh, well, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much, Megan. We could just keep talking forever, I think. But we probably need to wrap up the conversation at some point. Before we wrap up the conversation, first of all, is there any last words or anything that you would like to share or impart on our audience?
Gosh, I think we've gone in so many different places. You know, I guess I would just say for the speakers here, for the would-be for the people who really aspire to speak, just find what's true. You know, like find what's true. There's things we're all going to do because it's good for business or it's good for the whatever. There's all of that. But underneath all of that, there is like, what am I really here for? Like, what am I here to share, and who needs to hear it? Yes. And I think that is such an important thing that we can lose sight of when we're building a business and building a speaking business. And like, how do we just stay true to that? Yeah, I guess I'd leave people with that thought.
Amazing. And if people want to become, I don't know if you would call it a member, how do people work with you in Women Rising? Or I know that you're quite selective now in terms of speaking. Is there a speaking gig you would like or someone you'd like to attract in that area?
Oh, that's such a great question. I'm really interested in... Look, I want to be with women, right? I want to be with women, converse with women, speak to women. So yeah, women's events, women's conferences, women's gatherings, book things that will be coming up either for Women Rising or She Who Remembers. They're the things that I'm really calling in and very interested in. And people can connect with me. MeganDalla-Camina.com is probably the easiest way. We also have WomenRisingCo.com. That's where everything Women Rising is related, but everyone can get there through MeganDalla-Camina.com. So yeah, just keep it simple.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Megan. It's been such a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you so much. It's been beautiful.
All right, here's where you're standing. You can close this episode, think that was fun, and go back to doing things the way you've always done them. Or you can decide you're done being the speaker, the leader that people politely applaud and immediately forget. If you want to create the kind of moments we talked about today, the theatrical, the unforgettable, the profitable, I've put together something that'll change how you think about the stage forever. It's called Beyond the Keynote, Creating Your Illuminated Story. No fluff, no theory, just methodology I use with elite speakers and leaders who are done playing small. Go to illuminatedstory.com/masterclass. And hey, if this episode hit you somewhere, share it, leave a review. It takes 30 seconds and helps more people discover that great speaking isn't magic. It's a game and you can learn to win it. I'm Carmen Sederino. Don't just speak, illuminate. See you next week.